Hello there. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Waynesboro. If you are a visitor or new to Unitarian Universalism and would like to know more about this fellowship or our movement, please see the slide at the end of this service for contact information. My name is Laura Riggin. I'm excited to welcome you to this service that celebrates the 60th anniversary of the consolidation of the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America. What a good day to celebrate exactly who we are and from whence we come. So, in the words of Erica Hewitt of the Unitarian Universalist Association, welcome to this morning, this day, and this opportunity to be together in community, which is a time of joy, comfort, and sometimes challenges. This Unitarian Universalist congregation is a place where we come to learn more about being human. We are not here because we've figured out life's questions or because we think we've got it right. We come here to learn more about being in relationship together, how to listen, how to forgive, how to be vulnerable, and how to create trust and compassion in one another. This fellowship is a welcoming congregation to people of all sexual orientations, and we unconditionally welcome any and all of you to our community of caring. Let us move into worship, willing to be authentic with each other, honest within ourselves, and open to connection in all its forms. Unitarian Universalism, of course, is not based on dogma or creed, but rather is guided by our 7 principles. I had to look up the history of our principles and discovered that they do not date back to the original consolidation in 1961, but rather were adopted in 1984. Our relatively young faith has continued to evolve in its short lifetime, and the evolution continues. Next month, as we do every June, our fellowship will hold its annual meeting, and we will be asked to vote upon our support of or opposition to an 8th principle. And that is that we as Unitarian Universalists covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. As we hear about and celebrate our history as UUs today, and give serious consideration to what that means for us, I hope you will also give serious consideration to what this 8th principle will mean for our community. It is an important step. The flaming chalice is a symbol of our movement and our faith. As it is lighted, please consider these words that we so often recite when we are together. May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our power to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of freedom.
of myth and lore and legend, our trove of ancient story, cradle of most tender dreams. Let this be a house of peace. 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 Of peace.
Our words of prayer are by Douglas Taylor. Eternal Spirit, from whom all things come and to whom all things return, we gather in community, though virtually, still seeking to live in harmony. Each of us gathered in this time lives out our lives knowing our own story, our own private melody. Life at its highest and its sweetest is a sharing. Life is a sharing of our melodies, of our love and interest, of our yearning and questions. Individuals creating harmony in community together. May our different ways of knowing and naming what is holy or ultimate or meaningful blend together. May our voices be added to the holy chorus of life. May we practice our scales that we may better improvise and recognize where we come in and when it is our time. The world is rife with discord and trouble. Injustice and suffering weigh us down and trip us up and stop our voices. May we learn to trust in love, in God, if that is the way we refer to the ultimate. May we learn to trust in our own voices, in the trembling faith of our forebears, to trust that we have a part in this symphony and we can join the chorus and bring some beauty to the cacophony around us. May there be times of gentle tones and soothing melodies. May there be rhythms upon which we can rely to rally our spirits at need. May there be teachers and bandmates, fans and good companions to help call our best music out of us. May there be moments when we are transported, moments when we discover we are not playing the music so much as the music is flowing through us. The music is playing us. O Spirit of life, may our song be among the songs of the Spirit. May there be beauty in our song and in our living. May there be meaning and power in our song. And may our individual voices blend into the chorus that is spirit, meaning, life. May it be so. This morning, let us hold quietly in our hearts together all the joys and sorrows of this community unspoken.
Shine on me, oh, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me, oh, shine on me. Yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me. Lift me up, oh, lift me up. Let the light from the lighthouse lift me up, oh, lift me up. Yes, lift me up. Let the light from the lighthouse lift me up. Oh, hold me close. Yes, hold me close. Let the light from the lighthouse hold me close. Yes, hold me close. Oh, hold me close. Let the light from the lighthouse, please, hold me close. Oh, shine on me, shine on me. Yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me. Oh, shine on me. Yes, shine on me. Let the light from the lighthouse shine on me.
Grounded Someplace Deeper by Mark Ward. Reason is an important tool, sure, an essential arbiter of truth claims about the world. But religion is grounded someplace deeper, where we experience the joy of living and are connected intimately with all that is. Religion is an entirely human experience, but one that we get in touch with using some pathway other than intellectual argument. In religion, we seek to address not just what is, but also what we hope for and what we dedicate ourselves to. We rely on it to navigate the shoals of love and grief, compassion and estrangement, gratitude and disappointment, and mystery and wonder. As David Bumbaugh suggests, religion deserves reverence. It requires a vocabulary and a theology. This theology demands no intervention of unearthly forces, but invites us to open ourselves to different ways of living and learning. It considers the human a niche in the vast, intertwined plenitude of being. And just what is our niche? We are fragile, fallible sorts, for whom just being is a blessing and love is a pole star.
Clarence R. Skinner was the preeminent social prophet of the Universalist Church during the first half of the 20th century. His name is memorialized today in an annual award given at General Assembly to the sermon preached in our denomination that best exemplifies the social principles of Unitarian Universalism. During most of his career, Skinner was on the faculty at Tufts University. He came to this position from a career in parish ministry that had already established his political and preaching reputation. He eventually served as the dean of the theological school at Tufts from 1938 to 1945, and his work influenced a generation of Universalist clergy. A pacifist during World War I, a supporter of organized labor, a vocal defender of Sacco and Vanzetti, Skinner was frequently shunned by his colleagues because of his politics, but always respected and admired for his honesty and integrity. As he approached retirement in 1945, Skinner offered his vision of the message that the Universalist Church had to present in his book, A Religion for Greatness. This reading comes from the chapter on racism, and it is presented as Skinner wrote it, without changing the male gender references that were common parlance at the time. The religion of the unities and universals is a radical cure. It gets down to the roots out of which prejudice grows. It digs into the soil of man's selfishness, superstitions, and distortions. It destroys the vicious partialisms which would lock men into divisive cells of race, denying them the common rights of humanity. This enemy must be routed out on every front: economic, social, biological, and cultural. The only way to rout it is to supplant the fears and errors of partialism by a vigorous, realistic religion of universalism. For every denial, we must make an assertion. Man must enlarge the borders of his consciousness to include the human race. We must think, feel, and act in universe terms, and thus see how petty and sinful are the partialisms of our lesser selves. We must welcome differences because life in a varied world is richer than life in uniformity. We must recognize the rightful place of color, shape, and history in a syncretic culture. If we see life steadily and see it whole, we can appreciate all the parts. The part becomes misunderstood only when we see it without relationships as an end in itself. One race is no more necessary than one kind of tree or one kind of horse. Each has its own genius, and each may contribute to a life that is rounded, divine, and complete.
The Deep Unity of the Human Family by Amanda Popé. Humanism is primarily about who we are connected to, what we think about each other, and how we work for justice in the world. No matter what else they believe, humanists insist on the inherent worth of every person. According to humanists, we are all part of one human family and are connected to the rest of the natural world, part of a cosmic story far bigger than we can imagine. Humanists believe that we're in that story together, and that our work is to write our chapter with as much love and dignity as we can. In the humanist view, change will happen in our world because we make it happen, and the change will take all of us. I'm no longer interested in perpetuating the old paradigm of the humanist-theist divide. I never have liked polarities and dualities. They lead to all kinds of misconceptions, and this one is no exception. The humanists are old and stuffy and intellectual, one stereotype goes. They prefer debates to emotion, and they don't like to sing. Really, they're practically secularists, and who even knows why they go to church? The theists among us are down a path towards evangelical Christianity, says another stereotype, and all they care about is sneaking prayer into every service. If they have their way, there soon won't be any difference between us and the Presbyterians. Polarities breed stereotypes, and stereotypes are always oversimplified, often wrong, and usually pretty boring. On a practical level, the stereotypes, and more importantly, the whole idea of a humanist theist polarity, keep UUs squabbling with each other rather than focusing on the real needs and challenges of the world. It holds us back, ironically, from living out the full promise of humanism, to honor both the real and important diversity and the deep unity of the human family, and to create a world where that whole family flourishes. What if, instead of imagining humanism as one end of a seesaw, we saw it as a possibility that is open to all, regardless of their metaphysical beliefs? That's the lived reality of deed before creed, the organizing principle of Unitarianism. In 1866, James Freeman Clarke, Unitarian minister and early organizer of the American Unitarian Association, wrote, "We think it possible to have a church, and even a denomination, organized not on a creed, but on a purpose of working together. Suppose that the condition of membership was the desire and intention of getting good and doing good."
This week marks the 60th anniversary of the consolidation of the Universalist Church of America and the American Unitarian Association into something new, the Unitarian Universalist Association. Our congregation was formed in 1955 as part of the Unitarian Fellowship movement, which was the primary growth mechanism for Unitarianism in the post-World War II period. And then just 6 years into this local venture, our association was no longer just Unitarian, but Universalist too, and beginning to coalesce into something new, Unitarian Universalist. It is sometimes claimed that ours is the only religion that is named for a theology. Baptists are named for a ritual, Presbyterians for a governance system, Methodists for a spiritual practice, and Lutherans for their reluctant founder. But we are named not just for one, but for two theologies, both of them grounded in Christianity, and both of them considered by many, if not most Christians, to be heresies, not just differences of opinion. Unitarianism with a small u is the name given to a Christian theology that God is one rather than a trinity. Historically, that was spelled out with many slightly and largely varying details in different times and places, but by the time it came down to the early 1800s split between the New England Unitarians and Calvinist Congregationalists, the theology named Unitarian referred to a belief in the humanity of Jesus rather than his divinity. This was about Jesus as a teacher, an exemplar, maybe even an activist, but a man, not God. You would be forgiven for thinking that this was the most important theological idea of early American Unitarianism, but in fact, it was not. The ability of humanity to improve through our own effort, through our own moral growth and action, that was most important. This was a rejection of original sin. But the Congregationalists who opposed the preaching of liberal theology in New England's pulpits called the liberals Unitarians based on that one idea, that minor theological point, and it stuck. Universalism, as opposed to Unitarianism, with a small u again, is the name of a Christian theology that holds that God's love is infinite and that any human sin is finite, that no finite sin deserves infinite punishment, and thus it went against the very nature of God for anyone to be condemned for eternity. Yes, this was another path through which to oppose Calvinist theology, where our Unitarian ancestors believed that humanity was born with the ability, through our own effort, to improve. Our Universalist ancestors believed that nothing we could ever do, nothing anyone could ever do, was able to permanently separate an individual from what is most meaningful and most worthy. Everyone ultimately would be saved because God could not be God if it were not true. In the early 20th century, Universalism had moved beyond the theological idea of a loving God who does not send people to hell to a more demanding and radical ethical universalism in which we, here and now on earth, are the ones who must love and treat equitably everyone in the human family as they are. Two theologies then form our name, and at their core they promote distinct ways of seeing reality. Unitarianism's origin was about the nature of humanity, Universalism about the nature of the ultimate. And both of them naturally disposed its followers to a focus on this world rather than some theorized hereafter. And that gradually then reduced the differences between the Unitarians and the Universalists while making Christianity a less defining piece of present reality. It is sometimes said that the two denominations courted each other for 100 years before joining into a single body. Through that century, there were several attempts at cooperative efforts. Youth programming and hymnal creation were the most successful, but it was slow work because each denomination had its own ways of doing things, its own conceptual framework in which to place everything. And as the courtship neared its completion, in 1959, there was a final disagreement, if you will, over one single word in the document of consolidation that kept the new entity from forming for a couple of more years. What was that final disagreement over? Whether to use the phrase our Judeo-Christian heritage, as many Universalists hoped, or instead to use the Judeo-Christian heritage, which was a formulation preferred by the Unitarians. Now, we've talked many times about the tendency of linguistic nitpicking within our tradition, wordsmithing as if life itself depended on the one and only correct word being used in a written document. The difference between our and the felt really important to our leaders discussing it in 1959. The Universalist formulation showed some tendency to stronger Christian identification among Universalists than among Unitarians. Liberal, certainly, focused on this world, certainly, but a different self-conception than that held by many Unitarians. In 1961, the Unitarians convinced the Universalists to accept their wording despite the lingering differences, and our new association was formed. Legal documents finalized and signed on May 12, 1961. In a service of celebration held in Symphony Hall in Boston, the gathered congregation from across the land spoke these words that formed a ritual of consolidation. We, Unitarians and Universalists, children of the Judeo-Christian heritage, inheritors of the wisdom of the universal prophets, eager to experience the insights of the great faiths of the world, open to all sources of inspiration, ancient and modern, determined to explore the boundless ocean of truth which lies about on every hand and before, and welcoming into fellowship all people of whatever background of faith, here together on this night of consolidation, conscious of the presence of the past and our urgent tasks, dedicate ourselves anew to the free and universal fellowship of all humanity, that is, the church to be. The first decade of the new association was tumultuous. We nearly went bankrupt. We stretched our wings, reaching out into meaningful work for racial justice, joining the march in Selma, and having two of our members, a layperson and a minister, become martyrs in that movement and that cause, and forming bonds with the civil rights movement and Black organizations, including churches. And then we nearly fell apart in a controversy over the mechanisms of Black empowerment within Unitarian Universalism itself. We were a paradox. We were human. Not better nor worse generally than the nation around us, but striving to be better tomorrow than we had been so far. A decade ago, the Reverend Richard Gilbert said of Universalist ideas, "I think we are in the process of recovering the genius of Universalism, the idea of a human family an acceptance of world religions, marriage equality, racial equality, Gilbert says. The Universalist message is critical for a time when things seem to be coming apart. And do they ever seem to be coming apart now? As well as other ways we can see them coming together. Of course, our prospects and success seem less clear to some cradle Universalists a decade ago at the time of the 50th anniversary of Consolidation. The late Reverend David Bumbaugh wrote a piece for the anniversary edition of the UU World in which he summarized the differences between the U's and the U's, the Unitarians and the Universalists, at Consolidation, in these words. From the beginning, Unitarians were reluctant to be defined or to define themselves theologically. They had significant differences with some other clergy. No one denied that fact. They simply refused to concede that those differences mattered. Throwing around theological labels would only confuse people and distract them from the real focus of religion, the purpose of life, the real purpose of life, ongoing, endless, rigorous self-culture and moral improvement. Universalists, though, had found it necessary to define themselves with clarity. In 1803, they adopted the Winchester Profession, a theological statement of who they were and what vision they served. Over the years, they worked to restate their central theological identity in ways that addressed the changing context in which they found themselves. Their very existence depended upon their willingness to state clearly how they differed from more conventional religious formulations. Bumbaugh continues, I have sometimes summarized the two agendas by suggesting that Universalists brought to the Consolidation an unfinished but important theological project, while Unitarians brought to the Consolidation a set of highly questionable marketing plans grounded in a commitment to the central value of diversity. Bumbaugh, at age 22, was a Universalist who supported the Consolidation, but was less sanguine about his prospects 50 years later. Needless to say, there is no one view of the successes, failures, and ongoing challenges of our association now turning 60. It has not remained static, and the relationship of today's movement to our historical roots in two very different heretical Christianities continues to puzzle us and inform the ways we approach the very different issues of our day. And for the most part, we are no longer Unitarians and Universalists sharing institutions and structures, but something new, Unitarian Universalists. While this congregation was formed as a Unitarian fellowship before Consolidation, I became a Unitarian Universalist in a congregation that was formed after Consolidation. People like me who became UU as an adult, or those who grew up UU well after Consolidation, who developed their religious identity after the institution of lighting the chalice became the norm, after the water service or the flower service had made their way into almost every corner of our faith. For us, we may be interested in Unitarian and Universalist influences or strands of thought coming out of each side of that double history and what they can teach us, but our identities are only rarely Unitarian or Universalist rather than Unitarian Universalists. Religiously and not, the world has changed since 1961, and all of us with it. The differences that worried our spiritual leaders then are not the differences that occupy many of us now. And even though I do indeed have one seminary colleague who argued that the UUA should deconsolidate into new Unitarian and Universalist camps, he is a small minority, and he refuses to engage with his colleagues and with the denomination as a whole in ways that have been hurtful and led even to his being defellowshipped by the UUA, not because he wanted the two camps to separate, but because he did not engage and could not be part of who we are now. Separatism is not who we are now. Our short institutional history is fascinating and challenging and has brought us to where we are today. I encourage you to learn more about it. I leave you with this benediction written by James Morrison. Within each of our hearts there is a most glorious light. Go forth and let its spark help you understand what troubles both you and others. Go forth and let its light of reason be a guide in your decisions. Go forth and bring its ray of hope to those in need and help in both body and spirit, that they may find healing. Go forth and fan the flames of passion that help heal our world. Go forth and spread the warm glow of love, pushing back the darkness of the world. Go forth and share your glorious light with the world. Amen, and blessed be.
Please join me in hymn number 1017, Building a New Way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free, free from hate and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, our world will Peace and freedom is our